Welcome back to Grounded Spirits Podcast, a place where we're learning how to stay rooted while flying high. I'm your host, Laura Lynn, and today we have finally gotten to the part that I've been wanting to talk about the most of this book. So out of the 5 chapters, chapter 4 is the chapter that we're going to talk about today, and it's the one where we're going to get into the plants that get us high. So the last 3 chapters, we really focused on how to be rooted and how plants teach us to stay rooted and to form connections, not only within ourselves, with the plants, but also like with our community, with others, and how to celebrate with plants and how to mourn with plants and how to heal with plants. And we have a really good foundation on how to stay rooted with plants. But Grounded Spirits is all about staying rooted while flying high. So now we finally get to dive into that part of it. And this 4th chapter is called The Blossom Opens, and it's about plants in higher states, like I just mentioned before. The first section of this chapter is called Ritual Elation, so stimulating plants. We're going to be talking about like tobacco and coffee and like those kinds of plants, like plants that stimulate us, right? Then we're going to move on to the bacchanal. If you listen to the last episode, I could not pronounce anything in that one, so I'm going to try to do better in this one. But this is the one we're going to talk about plants and intoxication, so we're going to talk about like wine and beer, so on and so forth. Then we get into Soma, which is plants and the expansion of consciousness. And these are the plants that get you high. So the first one we'll talk about is cannabis, then magic fungi, opium, cacti, datura, and ayahuasca. And if you were to look at the table of contents of this book, you would see that there is another section called Under the Influence, Art and Psychedelics. But I think that that belongs in the 5th chapter because the 5th chapter is all about plants and culture. And I think that that would fit better in there. So I'm going to make the executive decision to talk about it in that 5th chapter, especially because the 5th chapter only has 2 sections. Whereas chapter 3 had 4, chapter 2 had 4, and chapter 4 has 4, but since we're talking about 6 separate plants, they each have their own section. So really, chapter 4, it's almost 200 pages, and it has like 8 sections. So that's why, in case you were following along with the book, that'll be for next week. So if you're ready to talk about how plants can make you fly high, so like, yes, getting high is one thing, and to do it with intention and seeking self-knowledge and cosmic knowledge is another. And so we're going to talk about how plants get us high to allow us to fly high in this 3D realm. So if that's interesting to you, stay tuned. All right, welcome to the first section. So it is Ritual Elation Stimulating Plants. And so in this section, we're going to talk about the cacao, the coffee bean, tea, the tobacco leaf, and kava. And I'm just going to go through them individually, but all of these plants have been used ritualistically for stimulation, meditative clarity, and focus. And they've all been used. Actually, like all of the plants that I'm going to talk about, all these drugs that I'm going to talk about, people have been using them for, if not thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. And that is so wild to me because, like, why is it so stigmatized now? Our ancestors, no matter where you're from, you have indigenous blood. Like, I've been learning about the Druids a lot recently, and oh man, they actually don't come out in this one, but in chapter 3, so last week's, I was talking a lot about the Druids, and I posted a picture on Instagram that you can go check out. It's in my highlights, and today I read a paper about Druids and about how St. Patrick converted them. And in that paper, I found out that the word Druids, like we call them Druids, is what the Greeks called them. Like they call them tree people, basically. And the Greek word, or Druids, comes from the Greek word for oak tree. Like, isn't that wild that we call some, like a whole civilization from centuries ago based on what people call them? It's kind of like how today we call them Germans, but it's Deutschland, you know, like where do we get German from? So like, it's just like weird how like that works. Anyway, so we'll start with cacao. So with cacao, this is on page 278. So cacao, first of all, is just like a chocolate bean. And it's really cool. There's actually a good depiction in here of it. So I could post that on Instagram. It's on page 272, and it's a cacao or cocoa leaf. Funny, it's from Germany. That's what I was just saying. So this is from 1705 from the book Metamorphoses of the Insect of Suriname. The caterpillar crawls on the mature cacao plant, the wonder bean from which chocolate is made. And it was so cool because when I went to the Amazon rainforest, I think it was 2018, when I went there, they had this like presentation so they were like indigenous people that were there. Like we had a hotel like down the stream. So like it was like isolated, you know, like it's not like they were just like putting on a show for these like foreigners. Well, I guess it was part of it, but like they still like lived how their ancestors did. Anyway, the point is that they did a presentation for us with the cacao bean, and so they would go around and show us each of the there's like a lot of different processes that need to take place, like a lot of steps that need to happen in order for one to extract the cocoa and to separate it between like the dark chocolate and then it's not white chocolate, but it's like white stuff that was surrounded around the bean. I'll try to find pictures and I'll post them on Instagram too, like from my camera roll, because it was a really cool process. Maybe I have a video too that how they mashed everything together, and it was like a whole feast. So they showed us that. They also made this like drink. And everyone was grossed out because the lady has to spit in it to like mix it up. But I feel like that's like it's like normal. Like it's a part of indigenous cultures. Like you're putting a piece of yourself into it and to share with the community. So like, I didn't mind it. I drank it. It was good. But then the nasty part that I did not partake in was that they had live grubs. And so they were like moving around and people were just like eating them. Some of them were roasted, but a lot of them were just like live. Like they were huge. Think of like the biggest caterpillar you've ever seen and then multiply that by like 10. Like it was huge. It was probably like my full index. No, probably like my thumb as far as like girth wise. My thumb, and then maybe like an inch or two larger than my thumb. Like it was huge, but people were eating it. So anyway, it was a really cool way to see like how chocolate is made and like straight from a tree to eating it as chocolate. It was really cool, like process to witness. But here on 278, it says that the Mayans placed cacao in the center of ritual ceremony and community interaction. It was associated with fertility and marriage rituals. The rite of death, the Maya would drink from the carved cups that had cacao god inscriptions. These inscriptions made sipping the chocolate a sacramental act. So that's cool. All right, we're going to move on to coffee. So with coffee, I have, first of all, never liked it. I've always loved the smell of it, but I always thought it was too bitter. And honestly, I think, like, everyone's going to hate me for this, but I think that people just love coffee because it's like a social thing. Like, you don't really like coffee, you just like it because it does like give you the jitters so that you feel like you can work more because you're so burnt out that you honestly just need sleep. But that's my unpopular opinion for the day. But honestly, I feel like, actually, I'm gonna keep going. Sorry. I think that coffee just makes people like more aggravated, and I feel like that's what leads to more conflict in the world. Okay, I think I'm done with my unpopular opinions. But here on page 270, David Lynch talks about coffee in a different way. So maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think I am, because even this morning on YouTube, a commercial came on for Mudwater, and he was saying that he just kept drinking so much coffee, that he had so much caffeine in him that he couldn't sleep. He like hated it, you know, and so that's why he decided to go to mushrooms and turmeric and other things that he puts into his mud water, and that he feels 10 times better because it's more natural. He doesn't have those jitters. He can actually sleep at night, and it's like, it's a better effect. So I think that the way that like vaping is being used instead of the tobacco leaves, or like wax pens are being used instead of the flower for weed, I think it's the same thing with coffee. I feel like as a society, we are abusing it. Like the fact that like Starbucks is as big as it is, there's no reason for that. Like zero reason for that. But it's because we've been ingrained that you have to drink coffee. Like everyone always thinks I'm so weird for not liking coffee. And I think you guys are all weird for liking coffee. So, okay, I think I'm done with my thing now. But David Lynch has a different way of seeing it. So he says, coffee became tied to what I call the art of life. I loved to go to diners and drink coffee and to try to catch ideas for the work. Coffee has always seemed to facilitate thinking and catching ideas. Not only that, but the flavor of coffee is beyond the beyond good. Even bad coffee is better than no coffee at all. And that was an excerpt from an interview in the Huntington Post in 2012. And again, that was David Lynch. He is a painter, filmmaker, meditator, and coffee enthusiast. So clearly people have liked coffee for a long time, even though I don't. And oh yeah, so I wanted to talk about this one too. So I'm gonna like butcher the name, but Thich Nhat Hanh, hopefully. If you saw the name, like you would know what I'm talking about. So think of like the Zen master. He wrote The Miracle of Mindfulness in 1996. Anyway, he's talking about tea, but I feel like it kind of goes along with like drinking coffee, because some people really enjoy doing this, like having your morning coffee. But I guess what I hate is like, even in shows, they show it like the second somebody wakes up, oh, I need my coffee. But then people are saying that like waking and baking is bad. You know, it's like, it's the same thing. They're both plants, right? So anyway, it says, drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it is the axis on which the world revolves. So now that I'm rereading it, it's not the way that I thought about it the first time. So I'm going to tell you what I thought the first time. I thought that he was saying that, like, drink your stuff so slowly and, like, take it in so nicely where you can, like, feel the heat go down your throat, so that you, like, pay attention to your surroundings so that you can see the earth rotating slowly. That's, like, how I saw it, which now that I'm rereading it, I'm like, okay, that's not what he was saying, but that was what I interpreted that first time. But yeah, so I think that's what we have for coffee. As we go through though, because they have like the little snippet at the beginning, like a little prose, and then they have a bunch of pictures. And so in the pictures, there might be like more facts about coffee. So, I'll read them then if that comes up. But next is tea, and I already read that from Thich Nhat Hanh, about tea, but tea has also like it has been from like the first time it says when there was an open flame, like a tea leaf or like a leaf fell into the water, and they were like, hey, this is good, like let's keep drinking this. So like that's like what they assume. And then back in ancient Chinese history, the tea was used both medicinally and in ceremony, and they would put the root, leaf, twig, blossom all into the tea to extrapolate all of the bits of the plants. But since the 9th century, Japan has used ritualistic tea ceremonies, and it evolved out of Zen spiritual practices. So it's like very connected to like the slowing down and really like meditating, reflecting on who you are and what you're doing. And I feel like that is what tea does. You know, teas relax us, like herbal teas relax us. And it says the energizing qualities of the caffeinated green and black teas, as well as the powerful stimulating attributes of the coffee bean, have also been embraced. Oh, okay, so here's another fact about coffee. It says the first coffee farms were planted in the Arabian Peninsula during the 15th century, where drinking the potent brew was celebrated by everyone from the Sufi holy men to early Ottoman royalty. All right, now moving on to the tobacco leaf. The tobacco leaf, this was used in Mesoamerica and Native American and indigenous traditions in the United States. And it's supposed to, I'm going to read this quote. This is from Enrique Salmon in 2020. Oh, it's right there. He wrote this book called Iwagara. I talked about it last week too. But he says that no other plant holds as much universal importance. When we inhale the smoke of tobacco leaves, we are creating a unifying connection with all the cosmos. The smoke flows in and out of our bodies, carrying with it our thoughts, further solidifying our connection to all things. So with the tobacco, it makes me wonder, like, you know how they say, like, cigarettes are so bad because they have all of this stuff in there, right? Like, I remember, like, growing up, there'd be commercials, like, there's tar in here, you're gonna hurt your lungs by smoking this. But, I mean, it didn't stop anybody, right? Like, people are still smoking cigarettes. But my question is why put in all those other chemicals? Like, why can't it just be like how a blunt or a joint is? Like, it's just pure flower, you know? Like, why can't it be just pure plant? Like, where maybe like if how does one get just pure tobacco leaves other than growing them to be able to like roll up and smoke? Because like tobacco is a grounding herb. And over the summer, I participated in these rape ceremonies where the administrator would use this like wooden, it's like hers was like there were two of the women that did it. One was, her tool was like in a frog, and so it had like I don't know how, like a straw. I don't know how better to describe this. It had like two openings. So it was like as if two straws were in the body of this frog. And so one would be for her lips so she could blow, and the other one would be for the one who was getting it nose. So she would put it into my nose, and then she would like shoot it up. Like she would blow into it, so then it would hit to the back of my nose, and then she would do it to the other side. So both nostrils, and it was a mixture of the ashes of tobacco and other plants. And so when they would shoot it up, it was intense. like I felt so heavy and so grounded, and everything, like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, the heaviness wasn't like in a bad way. The heaviness was like growing roots. Interesting. But that's what it felt like. It felt like you were growing roots when you were under this influence. And some people throw up, some people spit it out. One time I did throw up. One time I did just spit it out. Other times it was just fine. I think it also just like depended like where your mental state was. And for me, being an air rising, my head was always in the clouds. And so this would just like shoot you back down to earth. And I would cry on it. I would laugh on it. I would meditate on it. And it was really powerful and really amazing. I had some really good talks with God on it. And it really taught me how to trust and how to remain grounded and how to remain steady and secure within my own self. One time I was high, like on weed when I did it, and I could feel myself getting like plunged into the earth. Like it was bad in a good way. Another time I had just given a speech. Oh, I was talking about the astrology or something. And so you know how you get like that natural high when you're communicating, when you're doing a presentation. And so after the talk, I did it, and oh my gosh, it shot me back down. Like it's really good for grounding. So that was really cool. The other way I want to talk about tobacco is like through vapes, because I used to be a really avid vapor. My husband and I did everything, you know, like we would actually buy like cartridges, or we would buy like the disposable ones. We just loved vaping, and it was an addiction. But I think that we also needed it at that time, because like I said, tobacco is used for grounding. And when vaping, it forces you to take a deep breath to be able to ground yourself in your breath. And now neither of us do it. But I'm thinking about everybody else who still vapes, you know, like vaping is such a common thing now. And I'm not saying that it's a good or a bad thing. I think it's only bad if you can't stop. I think that all drugs are used for a purpose. That all drugs, you may need them for one thing or another. But I think it's always important, like the whole point of the drug is to be able to communicate with the plant so that you can learn from the plant, so then you can figure out how to do it yourself. Like in no way should you have to do a drug forever and always. And I feel like that's my biggest like tiff with coffee, is that it's an addiction where people cannot stop and instead are trying to like spread it instead of allowing yourself to learn the lessons that coffee is teaching you, to then be able to embody it on your own without it. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now with weed, where there was a time where I would only do it every once in a while, when I was younger. And then when I lived in Redlands, I would do it every day, but I don't think that it was in a bad way, because I was doing it every day. It was actually really cute, because I would wake up, I would do the whole wake and bake thing. I would wake up in the morning, go downstairs, take out my dogs to go to the bathroom, and then we would like play, you know, we'd play catch, my dogs and I, and then I had my bong, a flower I would light up, and then I would just sit out there and like thank the sun for rising. And then like with weed, I would like, once I like, you know, when you get that moment where you're like, oh, okay, like I feel it. She was my teacher. And so I would show up every day, like, okay, like, what are you going to teach me today? Like, I was like that eager student, like, okay, like, what are we going to learn? How can I implement this into my life? What new revelations can I now be privy to? And it was wonderful. And I did that every day. And then it felt like I was like cleaning my insides, because then one day when I went down and did my little routine, she said, that's it. Like, your house is clean. There's nothing left for you to learn here. And then shortly after, we sold the house. And now I get cravings. Like, I feel like she's calling me, like, hey, I have something to tell you now. Like, smoke right now. Or sometimes I'll be like, when I have extra time in my day, I'll be like, oh, okay, like, let me like check in with my friend. But I think that I'm at the point now where I have been able to learn her lessons. I have been able to implement them into my life. And so I do feel there being a day where I don't smoke daily or close to daily. Instead, it would be more of a ceremonial thing where I would do it maybe like once a month or once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every other month. I don't know. And doing it more in that way instead of being like attached to the hip with it like I used to be when I was in Redlands. But like I said, I don't think that it's ever a bad thing. And that was something that I really, really struggled with, because I always felt like I was bad for smoking, because it's like I'm supposed to be the good girl and I'm doing something bad. Like, if you go back through these episodes on Grounded Spirits, the first time that I even mentioned that I smoke, like, I'm over here like giggling and laughing, like I'm so embarrassed that I'm saying this like in front of an audience, because I had never told anybody. Like, weed started off, like me smoking it started off by when I would go hang out with guys and they'd be like, hey, you want to smoke? And I'd say yes. And then that was it. And I would never buy it for myself. It wasn't until I married my husband, who doesn't smoke, who actually hates it. Like in Redlands, he would never let me smoke inside. I always had to go outside, even for like the pen. He was like, go outside. I hate that smell. And so I think that came with growing, that I need to let go of that stigma of this being my guilty pleasure, to know, like, this is my teacher and I'm proud of her. She has taught me so much and I owe my life to her, because I would not be who I am without her. Like, weed has impacted my life that much, to the point where I was able to learn about myself and learn who I truly was outside of everybody else, outside what everybody was trying to tell me, what society was trying to tell me, what my parents were trying to tell me. I was able to block that all out because of weed, and weed teaching me who I am and really showing me the way of learning who I am. And I'm getting ahead of myself because we're not even on the weed chapter. But I'm just going to say this last bit and then we'll move on. That in that chapter, they quote Bob Marley by saying that, I'll read it to you exactly when we get over there, but he says something along the lines of, I smoke weed. She doesn't say weed, but I smoke weed for it to show me who I am, or like to know myself, or something like that. So, like, I'm not the only one. But okay, the whole point. The last thing I'm gonna say about tobacco is that in my book Monterey, there's a point where, in the first page, she falls down a deep, dark hole, and the first thing she sees is this guy lighting up. So she sees like the fire, the spark, as he's lighting his cigarette. And he offers her some, and she says no, because she's still her little goody two-shoes self. And then later on, they're in this lighthouse. And I don't remember exactly how or why, but she decides to take him up on the offer, and she's like, hey, like, I'm down to smoke. And then she does, and she gets bombarded by these demons. Like, she feels so much anxiety. And if you've ever smoked a vape, so not talking about like the actual tobacco or like a cigarette, like the vape, the just straight nicotine, you may have felt that. You feel a little anxious afterward. Like, as it's like coming down your body, you feel a little anxious. But then it just makes you like breathe in, breathe out more, so it grounds you even more. So I think that's kind of where the idea came for the book. That what if you couldn't ground yourself? And like, that's what happened to Reina in that book. But it's interesting. The whole reason I'm bringing it up is because here with Enrique Salmon, when he says that when we inhale the smoke of tobacco leaves, we are creating a unified connection with all the cosmos. The smoke flows in and out of our bodies, carrying with it our thoughts. And so Reina has really bad intrusive thoughts. And so when the smoke comes out, all of her thoughts come out as well. And those are the demons that are spiraling around her. So, and honestly, I didn't that's what's so cool about this book, is that it was so channeled that even like as I was writing it, I didn't understand like why a lighthouse, you know, or like later on, why a tree, why the white space. You'll understand what I mean when you read the book. But then it's cool that even like the names of the people, like Adonis, I found a book that talked about this flower that only blooms in the dark. And in the book, Adonis, they meet each other in the dark. Like they were able to glow together in the dark. And it's so crazy because like the name Adonis actually came from the real person who it's like by. And so like I guess it was always just like a name. I don't know how we came up with it, but he came up with it. So the fact that now I'm finding that this name is meaning all these different other things. Like even when I named Adonis, I didn't even know about the story with Aphrodite. And like Aphrodite shows up in the book too. So it's like really interesting, like the connection between them two, now knowing the Greek mythology behind their story, like the name. Obviously it's not the same person because in Monterey it's after a real life person, whereas mythology it's a myth, you know? Even though it may have been a real life person back in the day, but obviously they're not the same person. You get what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it's just interesting, like how Monterey really is from God. I was just the vessel to channel it. Now that I'm going through the pages, I really wanted to read this quote about tobacco, because this painting that this description is for is the absolute coolest painting I've ever seen in my entire life. Because the more that you look at it, the more that you see. Like, for instance, you think that it's just smoke, and then you start seeing like animals. You see a bird, you see a butterfly, you see a lizard in the roots, you see a waterfall on the eagle's back. You see so many cool things in this. So I'm definitely going to post it on Instagram. But I wanted to read the description. So this is by Luis Tamani, Flor de Tabaco 2, from Peru in 2020. In this work by the indigenous Peruvian artist Tamani explores tobacco as traditional ceremonial medicine, explaining of the plant, its light guides our minds, its wings refresh our soul, it surrounds us with its perfume. I know I read that so bad, so I'm going to read it again. It says, its light guides our mind, its wings refresh our spirit, it surrounds us with its perfume. So I just thought that was really cool. Okay, so next is kava. So I don't know that much about kava, to be honest. I'm just gonna read it. So, a member of the pepper family, kava is used to make a drink that has sedative effects and is often used in ceremony and ritual. Exhibiting a ceremony of incantation over the yacona or kava bowl prior to imbibing the sedative beverages to welcome royalty to the island. A mildly narcotic root, kava is represented in yacona rituals to mark life cycles, healing ceremonies, and community gatherings of many Pacific societies. So yeah, that's kava. Now moving on to the bacchanal, plants and intoxication. So like I said, we're going to be talking about beer and wine. So with beer in Israel, in a prehistoric burial site, there have been traces of wheat and barley residue thought to be at least 13,000 years old. And then wine has been being made as far as 6,000 BCE in the Neolithic era, from fermented drinks made with honey, rice, and other stuff. And then they talk about the different gods and goddesses from around the world that are associated with getting drunk. So in Japan, the Shinto goddess Inari is associated with both fertility and the fermented rice beverage sake. In Norse mythology, the brewing of mead or ale is linked to the god Ager. In early Egypt, Bes is considered the god of drink, dance, and other sensual pleasures. In African traditions, mythology spoke of the fierce warrior deity Ogun as the god of rum making. And then there is also one in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, the female deity Mayoel was considered the personification of maguey, the flowering portion of the agave plant, an ingredient used to make the ancient alcoholic drink octil. Octil was also known as pulque, a potent predecessor to tequila and mezcal. In Hindu myth, the eldest of the Varuni, the three daughters of the water god Varuna, is considered to be the goddess of wine. In early Christianity, the abbess Brigid of Kildare, credited with founding several convents in Ireland, and was made the patron saint of brews after her death in the year 525. So the whole point, there's more. Oh man. But the whole point is that like everybody has a god or goddess that's dedicated to this stuff. And in the Roman civilization, it's Bacchus, the beloved deity of wine and drunkenness. Known to the Greeks as Dionysus, the wine god was worshipped in celebrations of sensual pleasure and ecstatic states of drunkenness. So I'm sure you've heard of these parties where they would just get drunk and eat, and then they would throw up and then keep drinking and eating. And so it was their way of like letting loose and just allowing all of their inhibitions to be free and to just like lay off all the stresses. And it's really interesting because this was in the age of Aries, and so to survive in the age of Aries, you do the opposite, which is Libra, and Libra is about being the extra, like all about the extraness and about partying and having a good time. And it's interesting because now we are in the age of Aquarius, so the opposite is Leo. And so this is why everybody is like, we're all about becoming our best selves, becoming more authentic, shining our light from inside. And that's like very Leo. So it's just interesting how everything comes together. Moving right along, we're going to talk about absinthe now. So this was created in the late 18th century. A vibrant green herbal concoction was first introduced, a heady mix consisting of wormwood, anise, fennel, and other botanicals, and it was called absinthe. And it was an immediate sensation, in part due to its euphoric, mildly hallucinogenic qualities, which a lot of people enjoyed and loved. And I'm just going to leave you with this quote that, who was it? The writer Charles Baudelaire, a frequent visitor in the Parisian absinthe bars of the era, said in his poem, "Get drunk. Always be drunk. That's it. That's the imperative. Get drunk and stay that way. On what? On wine, poetry, virtue, whatever, but get drunk." And I think what he means here is to be intoxicated with the life around you. Be intoxicated, like be extra. Like it's okay to be extra, because I think, in his time, he was in the age of Pisces. So to combat that, you go to Virgo, right? What is Virgo? It's all about order, about criticism, about perfection. And so he's saying, like, screw that. Let's just have a good time. Let's be able to like let loose and forget about trying to be perfect and shame people for not being perfect. Like, let's just get drunk on life and have a good time and just take it all in and yeah, be extra, be luxurious. The next page is 296, and it's a picture of half-naked people in togas running around in a circle, having a grand old time, probably super drunk. And yeah, it's like one of those parties. Then we have some absinthe pictures. And then there's like a really creepy picture of Pan. So the half goat, half human. You see him in Chronicles of Narnia. And the Romans identified him with the wine god Bacchus, but he looks like super creepy in that picture. So I'm not going to be posting that on Instagram, but just wanted to let you know about it. I'm going to keep going here. Now they're talking about wine and how wine has been created like for centuries, has been around for centuries, was created centuries ago. It's another way of saying it. They talk about how in India it was considered taboo for women to drink wine. I forgot to mention this with the tea, but that like in Russia, tea was only for the nobility. So like normal people could not drink tea. Like that was not allowed. So that's kind of weird. And then, so with wine, this is on page 304. It says, from the tomb of Naket, an astrologer and grapevine gardener, grapes are picked for Egyptian wine. Grapes and wine in Egyptian culture symbolize revitalization and rebirth. They saw a connection between the red color and the blood of Osiris. Interesting. But like, why grapes? Because in San Diego, I don't know if this place is still open because I went years ago. But in San Diego, they started making wine with a bunch of other fruit, and it was good. Like there was a pineapple wine, there was a guava wine, there was a blueberry wine. Like all of these things were so delicious, and I'm like, why did we always just use grapes? Like, why didn't we expand on these other things except for these people here in San Diego? So just interesting to think about, like, why grapes? Like, I guess, like, with Egyptians, it was because it was associated with the blood. But actually, isn't that kind of what we do in Catholicism? We take communion of Jesus's blood, and that's supposed to be the wine that we drink. So that's weird. Next, on page 308, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the goddess Mayawel. So I'm just going to read it. It says that she came to earth with Quetzalcoatl. I know I'm saying it wrong, but it's close enough, right? It's like the main guy. Quetzalcoatl. To become a tree. So she came to earth to become a tree, but her jealous grandmother followed her and split the tree in half, tearing her into pieces. Quetzalcoatl buried her remains, which grew into the agave plant. And so that's why it became sacred, because it's like a plant of her. So we also see this in Native American indigenous creation stories, like with the Sky Woman, where somebody died. I don't think it's like her daughter or something. And then from when she buried her, from her heart, where her heart was, like that's how strawberries came. So like that's not, that kind of myth is not strange, I guess. Oh, okay. So I kind of answered my own question about the other wines. So there were other wines. In Africa, there was there was a palm wine. So like from palm trees. And so this is a picture of the wooden palm wine cup. The carved vessel from what was there. What was there. So where there was is where the Bakuba tribe was. Okay, moving on. It was used for drinking palm wine, which contains nutrients beneficial to the skin, the hair, and even the nails, and vitamins and minerals like zinc and magnesium. So, like, why don't we drink that today? Like, where is that today? Then we have some more pictures. This one, he's like squeezing the grape juice out of the grapes and into this guy's mouth. Then we see like the goats in here, some kids, some naked ladies. And then on page 214, they show like these drunken kids. So I don't know if they were supposed to be part of it or not, but the fact that somebody in 1490, and it's Botticelli. So, like, we know this guy. So, like, why did he decide to... Oops. Fell. Why did he decide to paint these naked, drunken children? That's strange. Then we... Also on 314, there's a picture of a vessel carved with a noble of the Moche. And it is thought to be associated with fertility rites, depicted pouring of the chicha beer from corn and other wild plants. I think that's what the thing that I was talking about at the Amazon rainforest, where she like spit in it. I think that it was that, because she had to spit in it. It was like she was like grinding something up. She had to spit in it to like grind it up better. And then from there, she added it to this other thing with the alcohol. So like any germs that she may have had in her spit, like get killed with the alcohol that she's like mixing this up. And it was from corn and other wild plants. So it might have been that I drank. I don't know, but it was delicious. But it was alcoholic though. Like you could taste the alcohol, but it was good. Then there's a picture of wheat and about like its life cycle. So it's like some is like getting cut, others is already like being used as hay, and it's supposed to be like the fertility, the bounty, and the resurrection. So I think that's like what the whole thing means, because if you think about it, like if you have an excess of grapes or you have an excess of wheat and it's gonna go bad, might as well do this process to ferment it and like create something so that it doesn't go to waste. I feel like that's like where a lot of our ingenious comes from, is from not wanting things to go to waste and using every bit of it. Like I know that when we lived in Redlands, we became very creative and very innovative with the stuff that we had, and like making our own stuff, and it was a cool, good time. Next is some more pictures. Some of these make you feel kind of uncomfortable. Like on page 320, I'm not going to post this because she's naked. And it's like, this girl's naked. You could clearly tell she's drunk. And then this other girl looks like she's going to kiss her. But then there's like this little baby kid with his little baby wee-wee hanging out. And then these like weird fawns, like they're half goat, half human, are all staring at this drunk girl with her titty out. Like, I don't know. So, yeah. So yeah, I think that might be all we have for that part. Now we are going to move on to soma. Plants. So actually I want to talk about soma, what that means. So soma comes from the Hindu Vedic teachings when they mention a mysterious substance known as soma as an important drink in certain spiritual rituals. In the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism, another unknown botanical, haoma, is praised as a divine plant. The ritualistic ingestion of psychoactives is particularly linked with an early enigmatic festival known as, okay, and then it goes on to the illusionism mysteries, and it's asking like, oh, what is illusionism? And yeah, it's like a parasitic fungus or something. But anyway, so soma, plants and the expansion of the consciousness. So like I said, we're going to be talking about the 6. So very similar to the way that I did it before with the not so psychoactive inducing plants. We are going to get into them. But I'm going to start it with this quote because this is a really good one. It says, I think of going to the grave without ever having a psychedelic experience is like going to the grave without ever having sex. It means that you never figured out what it was all about, the mystery in the body and the way the body works itself into nature. And that's why I'm so thankful that I did go on this quest where I did do mushrooms, where I did smoke weed, because like I said, it has given me this worldview that I would not have otherwise been able to attain. And without this worldview, I wouldn't have had the ideas that are going to fundamentally change the way that the world works. Whether that's just for me, whether it's just for my family, or for the entire world. But I think that already, like my ideas of even starting this podcast, like this podcast has been heard by thousands of people. So, like, I think that that's really crazy to think about that. Like, even one sentence from somebody, like if you see a quote on Instagram, like it does change in a small way. So then if you do more and more and more, it's just going to keep going, growing, changing. So I think that that's cool. We're going to get into all of the psychedelic plants after the break. So to begin, the word psychedelic comes from the Greek word psyche, which means mind or soul, and delune, which means to reveal or to make visible. So psychedelic means manifesting the mind or making the soul visible. And it wasn't until 1975 that the term psychedelic was used at the New York Academy of Sciences. So it is relatively a new word. But I do think that it is correctly defined, as I would say that psychedelics do open the mind like that. So we're first going to talk about cannabis. So I love how the book outlines what each of the plants are. So from the family, Cannabaceae, the active compound, tetrahydrocannabinoid. I said that wrong. Cannabidiol. Tetrahydrocannabidiol. The effects are euphoric, serene, aphrodisiacal. The cultural names are Bang, Doña Juanita, Ganja, Santa Yerba, Kerala grass, La Santa Rosa, Sidhi, Zacatechino. Colloquialisms are blaze, bud, chiba, coli, flower, ganja, grass, green, kind, Mary Jane, reefer, rope, sinsemilla, skunk, trees, weed, zooey mama. The usage is inhalation, edible, topical. And there's a really cool picture of a naked lady. It's like, she has like fire all around her. I might be able to post it if I blur out her nips. And then she has like smoke everywhere, and she has like the weed flower like on her third eye. It's pretty cool picture. And that's by Alex Gray. There's a lot of Alex Gray in the next few sections, and they're all amazing. So I'll pick a few to put up. So the weed chapter, the cannabis chapter, starts off by talking about how hemp has been used for everything. It's very functional, from fiber, paper, cloth. And so they have found marijuana leaves like 5,000 years from 5,000 years ago. And what they would do is they would get a bunch of weed and set it on fire at a funeral. So then everybody gets high. And I think that's kind of beautiful, to be honest. Like, I think that'd be really cool. Like, at my funeral, just get everybody high for me, you know? And then maybe they'll be able to, like, see me from the dead. That would be cool. Okay, so here's that quote I was telling you about earlier. It says, "When you smoke the herb, it reveals you to yourself." Beautifully said. So I feel like I've already talked about weed so much that there's really not much for me to say here. But yeah, it's been ceremoniously used throughout Central Asia and in the Persian faith of Zoroastrianism. In Hindu traditions, the ritual drinking of bang or bong, the beverage made from the leaves and stems of the cannabis plant, remains associated with Holi, this festival of spring. And today's the first day of spring, so that's super cool. Yeah, it was introduced to Napoleon from Egypt, and then they had hashish. And then here are some people, so they had clubs de hashishim, or hashishins, private salons in Paris that William Butler Yeats was a frequent visitor, Charles Baudelaire, Victor Hugo, the author of Les Mis, the poet Arthur Rimbaud, and his lover Paul Verlaine. So yeah, a lot of people have done it. Yeats has famously wrote about the experience as, "It is absolute bliss. It is calm and placid beatitude. Every philosophical problem is resolved. Every difficult question that presents a point of contention for theologians and brings despair to thoughtful men becomes clear and transparent. Every contradiction is reconciled. Man has surpassed the gods." And I would definitely agree that that is what weed does to you. It makes you slow down so that you can hear the voice of yourself. The part of you that has been dying to come out. I think that weed also like slows down time, where something that could feel long is actually just a few minutes. And I feel like it allows you to get closer to your breath. Then there are some depictions of weed, and also some illustrations of trying to get people out of jail for it. So it says, "Pot is a reality kick. Smoke pot, it's cheaper and healthier than liquor. Repeal the prohibition." I don't know what that one's about, because that's alcohol, but yeah. And then there's one painting. Maybe I'll post this one. This is actually a cool one. It's on page 340. It's called Hashish, the Hashish Smokers from Italy in 1887. In this lusciously sensual oil painting, a group of female hashish smokers luxuriate in a state of blissful euphoria after smoking the cannabis-based resin. And they do look really peaceful, so I'll make sure to post that. All right, next we have Magick fungi. The little cheat sheet here for psilocybin is like the families, which are a lot. The psilocybe, I can't say these, so I'm gonna move on. The active compounds, the psilocybin, psilocin, embolic acid, muscimol. There are a lot of different kinds of species. The effects are the hallucinogenic, sense of awe, strong visions, shamanic characteristics. The cultural names are, I'm only going to read the ones that I can pronounce. Fly agaric, the blue runner, flying saucer mushroom, a pixie cap, a witch cap. The colloquialisms are blue meanies, boomers, divine dung mushroom, golden cap, penis envy. The usage is edible, inhalation, and fermented. So I have only ever done the edible ones. I've done them 3 times, and each experience was unique and wonderful. Allen Ginsberg says in a letter to Dr. Timothy Leary in 1961 that psilocybin seems to me to be a sort of psychic godsend. And it's interesting because a lot of cultures say that these are godsend. For instance, Mayan and Aztec people, the word Teonanacatl translates to the flesh of gods. And they have been used for over 10,000 years. They can be traced to rock paintings depicting the species in Australia. In Mesoamerica, there have been statues of mushroom deities. And with the Vikings and Siberian tribes, they have also used these in rituals. And then we've already talked about like the stone ape theory. I believe it was chapter 2, maybe it was chapter 1. And the whole like Life magazine about seeking the magic mushroom, when like these white people came down, did a ceremony with the indigenous and talked about it in that magazine, and it really like took off. And then we have Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann, who then extrapolated the psychedelic compound of the mushroom and turned it into LSD. And then we have another Alex Gray painting. This one's so cool. It's like this hand, and you can see the veins and the muscles and the bones. And then behind you see like all these little, these different creatures, all with the mushroom. It's a really cool. And then you have like an eye in the middle. Super cool. That's on page 345. And then there's just some more images of the mushroom. This is a really cool painting. It's by Luke Brown. It's called Xochipilli from Canada in 2019. The visionary artist Brown creates work that is, as they explain, direct translations of his personal experiences of heightened inner vision. Here, his exploration features the figurative totem associated with the Aztec god of flowers and fungi, Xochipilli. And this is another one of those paintings where you could just keep looking and keep finding new things. So it's super, super cool. I'll post this one for sure on Instagram. Next is opium. It comes from the family Papaveraceae. The active compounds are morphine and codeine. The effects are sedative, hypnotic, blissful ecstasy. The cultural names are black poppy, Aphion, milk of poppies, misery. Colloquialisms are Auntie M, black chocolate, God's medicine, midnight oil, Otar the dragon. The usage is edible, inhalation, and injection. So they have been used over 6,000 years. They are associated with the Egyptian deity of Thoth, the god of wisdom. But remember, we also talked about this in chapter 1, that Thoth is also the writer of the Emerald Tablets, and he was an Atlantean. And that's going to be our next book. So we have one more week of plant magic, and then we're going to go into the Emerald Tablets. So I'm really excited about that, to read all about that. So here, Thomas de Quincey in 1882, in the Confessions of an English Opium Eater, states, "Not only the opium eater, but the opium is the true hero of the tale," he writes, "the legitimate center on which the interest revolves." And it is thought that Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote Kubla Khan under the influence of opium, and that it's super, super addictive. People now use it as heroin, so I'm never going to do it like that. So I can't tell you too much about it, but there's some like really trippy trippy pictures here, some images. I may post one. And then I hate that the last picture of this section is of a woman, and you can tell she's so high, like she's having a good old time inside her head, but they don't have any like who it's by or what's going on here, so no description. Okay, moving on to peyote. This one has the best images, and the first image that we have here is of, it gives me feminine energy, but I guess it could be a guy. But she's like growing out antlers, and then she has like deer on each side of her shoulders that are coming out of her head. And then even if you look closely, you can see the deer head and the antlers that are coming from her as part of the deer, like under her face. It's really cool. But what I really wanted to talk about was that she has like a galaxy. You know how galaxies in like those pictures, like they're spiraling, that's the best way to say it, right? They're spiraling in, kind of like how water goes down the drain, it like spirals. Sorry, I just got distracted. Coming out of her head is a tree, and there's like all this light coming out from under it. I'll for sure post this on Instagram. I'll talk about the tree. I'm gonna talk about the tree now. So today, when I was driving, I was looking at a tree. And interestingly, I was not high when I came up with this revelation. But it was just like really cool, because when you look at a tree, it has like one stump, right? Like one trunk. And so the trunk is the tree. But then as you grow, everything gets diverged, you know, like first it grew like one branch, and then that branch turned into 2 branches, and then that branch turned into 4 branches, and it just kind of goes on like that forever. So it goes back to the first chapter of this book with the Fibonacci sequence, and I feel like trees are a perfect example of that. And then it goes into like my research with like knowledge, and saying like all knowledge comes from the tree trunk. It's all just our perception of the universe. And that's where we have to, like, our trunk, we're becoming too top heavy. Like, we're putting too much energy into the makings of the leaves and more branches and like more on top, where no one is focusing on the trunk, and it feels like we're going to fall over, we're going to tumble down. And so we really need to have more people that can put energy into the trunk. And those people would be polymaths. So people that can study several subjects to be able to put all of these different branches knowledge together. Anyway, back to this picture. I believe this one's also by Alex Gray. Like I said, he has a lot of images in this book, but it's not. Oh my gosh, it's Luis Tamani. Oh, how cool. He has really good work. I love his work. So it says Luis Tamani, Luz Universal, Peru, 2015. A figure sits meditatively surrounded by sacred peyote cacti. As the artist explains, the work is meant to encourage a reconnection to nature and to our own essence. We are all receptacles of the universal light. And so that universal light is coming out of her solar plexus. And it's coming out and creating, it's like directly related to the dragonfly and the hummingbird. And I think that's really cool because remember when I was talking about spirit and what spirit means, that's different than soul. So when I was talking about my chart, I was saying, and also this comes out in Carlos Castañeda's work, that we have these light tentacles, if you will, or strings of light that come out of the abdomen and allow you to send your energy into the universe. But then in Carlos Castañeda, they take it a step further and say this stuff can actually hold on to things. Like these strings of light can hold on to rocks or to animals or to people. And Don Genaro is able to climb up a waterfall using these strings of light coming out of his abdomen. So it's so interesting to see it now here in this image of these strings of light being tied to these flying creatures. That it's the whole like the spirit, or like connecting to the flying high, the flying aspect of getting high. But this person, she is so grounded, like she's sitting like crisscross on a bunch of cacti on the peyote plant, and they almost look like lily pads in the water, and then underneath there's these roots and leaves, and it's so beautiful. But what I really want to talk about, before that, and on her leg she has all of these different layers. So all the colors are different layers of, I don't know, like I don't know how to explain it, but I can feel it. Like it feels like tingles, but it's like it's her growing her roots. And so it's the whole thing with grounded spirits, like stay rooted and fly high. And I feel like this is a perfect representation of it, because even like that tree that's above her, they kind of look, there's you have the flower of life, so with the circle. So back when I was talking about my soul, mind, body, spirit chart, or maybe it was in the Fibonacci episode, in chapter 1 of this series, where I was talking about how the Fibonacci sequence works with God learning who God is outside of the Holy Spirit, and then becoming aware, and then going further and further and further until now God is aware through us. So that's why we are a human body experiencing, or like, how do I say it? A spirit experience, having a human experience, but we're just spirit. We're just part of God. And so you see that above her head as well. But what I really have been wanting to talk about for the last however long now, and talking about this painting, is her hands. On her hands, she's holding fire. And I have felt this before. Like it literally feels like fire. Like it's not hot, but it glows. And you feel with this energy that you have coming out of your hands, like this glowing light, you feel like you can heal with it, like legitimately heal somebody. This also comes out in my book of Monterey, where I put my hand over Adonis's body and it instantly is healed because of the light that's coming out of my hands. But like even in real that, and like I hadn't experienced that, like what happened in the book, I hadn't experienced that in real life until after I had written that, where I was able to heal just with my hands. But But this is like a perfect representation of it. Like, it literally feels like it's fire. But it also goes to show like why holding hands means so much, because it's like you're sharing your fire, you're sharing your light with that other person. Or even like when you put your right hand over your heart to say the Pledge of Allegiance, or to like promise somebody something, you put your hand over your heart. So it's like you're affirming with extra energy that like your heart is in it. And so that could also, like for the Pledge of Allegiance, like how they force students to do it, like I feel like then that's why it's wrong. Because you shouldn't force somebody to make a promise connected to the heart unless they want to make it. Like that can't be forced onto somebody. So, moving on to the peyote plant and San Pedro. So throughout this section, they always talk about peyote as like the divine feminine. They all the pictures, like right now I was talking about like the woman, you know, but they always talk about it as the divine feminine. But with Carlos Castañeda, he talks about Mezcalito as a man, and then Don Juan calls him a protector. So, like, mixed messages there. And then I was so mad that Carlos Castañeda has not been mentioned in this book at all. But then he gets mentioned for ayahuasca when he never talked about ayahuasca once. So, like, that was annoying. So, with Carlos Castañeda, he talks a lot about peyote. So, that's why I'm mentioning him now. But he also smoked the psilocybin. And our next plant is Datura, I believe. And yes, or like a couple of, like the next one after. Datura, and he did that one as well, but not ayahuasca. So I just wanted to make that clear if you are reading this book. So with peyote, it has been used for over 8,000 years. There have been many foreigners to take this plant. So in 1898, Mezcal, A New Artificial Paradise. It was written by physician Havelock Ellis. And after that, there were loads of people who tried it, and they all say that peyote is a way of connecting to God. It's like a divine messenger without the medium of a priest. And it's just like a way to directly connect to God. So in Carlos Castañeda, the first time that he takes it, Mezcalito turns into a dog and he's playing with him. And that was the sign for Don Juan to work with him. Then the next time, or a few times after, he asks him a question. He asks Mezcalito a question, but he doesn't remember what the question is once he's awake. But he shows him his dad, and he like has like a lot of like healing with his dad, and he says all these things to his dad that he would never say in real life, but it was so healing just to get it out. So peyote really is used for that spiritual cleansing and healing, and that's what it's depicted as here too. I've never taken this one, so I can't talk too much about it, but these by far are the best images, so I'll probably post almost all of them because they're trippy, but like in a way that it makes sense to your soul. So that's really cool. And peyote, it's just a cactus. It's like a little button. And so with in Carlos Castañeda, he has to chew like 14 buttons, and you just chew it. You don't swallow it. And that's why it's called like mezcalito. So like it's like in Spanish mezcal, like I don't know how to explain it in English, but like it means to chew. So it's just like you're chewing it. And yeah, so I'm gonna go post these pictures and then we'll talk about the next plant. So the next one is Datura, but I wanted to talk about the last picture that I posted. It's by Jason Traeger. It's called Wisdom Teeth from the United States in 2009. The visionary artist Traeger often explores modern mythologies in his psychedelic works. In describing the inspiration behind wisdom teeth, the artist states, "A cactus which emerges from the light of the divine feminine to subdue the blind penis lizard of progress." And this art piece is so trippy. Can't even comprehend what is going on. And it's just so wild that this came out of somebody's mind. And like, sometimes like you get images in your mind, but there's no way for you to explain it to the outside world, like even through art. I feel like sometimes that happens to me. So the fact that not only did somebody think this up, but then was able to paint it or draw it however they brought it to life, it is such an interesting concept, and I can't even begin to describe it. So you're just gonna have to go to Instagram to see it. It's gonna be in my highlights or my story if you're listening to this when it came out. Okay, so Datura, the family is Solanaceae. The compound is L. scorpoleum. The effects are profound visions, hallucinogenic delirium. Cultural names are Indian apple, Jamestown weed, poison lily, sacred thorn apple, hierba del diablo, angel's trumpet, brugmansia, devil's weed, Jimson weed, mad apple, trumpet weed. Usage are inhalation and edible. But in Carlos Castañeda, they do more than that. Like, they actually make like a paste out of it, like through boiling the roots, and then I don't know what they do a bunch of stuff. And then he has to find a lizard, and one has to get its eyes sewn, the other one has to get its mouth sewn. Then you put the paste on your temples, and you ask the lizards a question, and then they go, and then they tell you. Well, one lizard goes, and the other one is like telling you what his sister is saying, and they tell you, and they show you these pictures. And then Carlos Castañeda, he thinks that they're his own thoughts. Like, he doesn't know that it's the lizard talking to him. But then Don Juan is like, how do you not know yourself enough to know what thoughts are yours and what thoughts are coming from outside of you? So that's one way that it's used. Another way is like the way that they say here, like an edible version, but it's still brewed. It's more of a tea, and it makes him really sick. But then he's able to like gain the hallucinogenic properties of it. I, for one, am very upset because in Carlos Castañeda, he says like the devil's weed, which is also what it says here, except it's in Spanish. One of the terms of it, hierba del diablo, that just means devil's weed. Oh, they even say it for the colloquialisms, devil's weed. And so I always thought it was just like normal weed, like cannabis, when I was reading it the first time around. Because they always call that, they always say, oh, you're smoking the devil's weed, or what is it, like the devil's lettuce or whatever. So that's what I thought. And I really associated with Carlos Castañeda's, experience with weed when Don Juan would talk about like, weed shows you power, weed shows you yourself, weed shows you all of these different things, how to live life, which I had experienced with weed, with like cannabis, But then as a continued reading, I realized that no, it's not talking about cannabis, it's talking about this other thing. And I don't know why I didn't bother looking up what it was until like way after I had finished probably all 3 books. Come to find out, I had Datura, this plant, growing in my Redlands house, and it was a weed. I would like cut off its roots. I would pull it out of the ground, and it would always come back, and it was strong. These roots were thick. and I could never get rid of it. And now I'm just like kicking myself because it's like, man, like I had this growing in my yard. Like I was so lucky to have this growing on my property, and I never once used it or thought about using it. And the only like how do I say it? The only drawback is that this is the only plant in this whole chapter where they caution death. But afterward, it always says, if you take too much, you're gonna die. But I'm thinking, so does that mean you could eat unlimited peyote buttons and you wouldn't die? Or that you could eat all the mushrooms and you wouldn't die? I feel like anything in excess could lead to death. No, not just this. But this is the only one that it says, but that I guess that's what leads people to this, because here, I'll just read it. It's this is a picture by or a drawing, a painting, an art, an oeuvre, by Maxwell Ashby Armfield, Datura in bronze. It's from England in the 1920s. Datura, or the devil's trumpet, has a hallucinogenic potency, yet sometimes deadly chemical effect, making the plant both highly desired and deeply feared. So that's interesting. The word Datura comes from an early Sanskrit word meaning divine inebriation, and it has been used in rituals for a long time. It is a way to communicate with the spirit realm. Oh, and then the Chumash. So this is the Chumash are Native Americans who lived in the Santa Barbara region, and their creation story has to do with Datura. So I wanted to read it to you. It says, one prominent, this is not from this book. I looked this up separately. But this book did say that Datura was mentioned in a creation story, so then I went to go look what the creation story was. One prominent Chumash creation story involving the Datura plant is the tale of Hutash, the Earth Mother, and Wiyot, the Sky Snake. According to this legend, Hutash and Wiyot were the first beings in the world. Wiyot desired to consume everything, so that's the Sky Snake, including Hutash, Mother Earth. But she sought refuge in the form of a Datura plant. As Wiyot attempted to swallow Hutash, she transformed into various creatures, escaping his grasp each time. Eventually, Hutash transformed into a woman and gave birth to the first Chumash people. This story highlights the Datura plant's role in a symbol of protection and transformation in Chumash mythology. So isn't that so interesting? Like, out of all the plants, she decided to turn into a Datura, and so now it is said to be it is said to mark a transition between the spirit and material world. And the oracles at Delphi, they also use the Datura to enhance their powers of divination. And in 1705, there is mention of the Datura of these guys ate some and they turned into natural fools and were pleasant for comedy, and they underwent thousands of simple tricks, but after 11 days returned to themselves again, not remembering anything that had passed. So isn't that weird? But Georgia O'Keeffe, this is her favorite subject, and so she drew a lot of Datura plants. They really are gorgeous. I have so many videos so maybe I'll post some of those on Instagram as well, of the Datura plants, like with bees in them. Like, they had the most beautiful white flowers. So, pretty cool. All right, moving on to ayahuasca. So with ayahuasca, family is Malpighiaceae. Active compounds are harmine, harmaline, dimethyl-tryptamine. The effects are euphoria, spectacular visions. Cultural names are vine of the soul. Okay, and then this part I did not know. The colloquial way of referring to ayahuasca is DMT. Like, I had no idea that that was the same thing, but I guess it is. And then the usage is edible or brewed. And so it turns out ayahuasca, it means, in the Quechua language, aya means spirit or soul, and huasca means to vine. So maybe it's like a way of like capturing, or like a way of going down the path of the soul, or like the vine could be like an invisible string of some sorts to the soul. So Pablo Cesar Amaringo Shunya, a Peruvian folk artist and shaman, says, "From experience, I came to learn that ayahuasca bestows upon the user knowledge about a variety of topics, not only consciousness and perception, but also leads one to realize what we perceive is an illusion." And of course, this is directly related to, in Hinduism, the concept of Maya. Alan Watts talks a lot about Maya, that Maya is an illusion. And Emma Lokai, she's on Instagram. She is amazing. She's so dedicated to self-concept work. And she keeps saying that everything in the 3D is an illusion. So like close your senses off to the world and only believe what you see in your mind's eye. And then when you finally open up your eyes, you will see that in the 3D world. So it's like really interesting to be able to get to these kinds of concepts without the use of ayahuasca. Not to say that she didn't use it. I mean, I don't know her like that. She might have used ayahuasca, and in which case, like, thank you for using ayahuasca. Thank you, ayahuasca the plant, for helping her get to that point, if it is she did. I'm going to message her to see if she'd want to come on to the show, because she is so amazing that I would love for you to hear directly from her. If she'll change your life, because I don't know, she's really cool. So that's something to look forward to in the future. Okay, next, okay, so here, the poet Allen Ginsberg published in 1963, called the Yaga letters, and Yaga is a colloquialism also for ayahuasca. It says, in these correspondences, Burroughs describes, so I guess it's not by Allen, by the Yaga letters. This is Burrough then, William Burrough. Oh, okay, I get it. So Burrough and Allen Ginsberg, they're sending each other letters, and that's what they're called, the Yaga letters. Okay. So Burroughs describes this as space-time travel. This is the most powerful drug I have ever experienced. That is it produces the most complete derangement of the senses. You see everything from a hallucinated viewpoint. Yaga is nothing like anything else. And we have another Alex Gray painting here, and then this really amazing one. Let me see who it's by. Pablo Amaringo, Misterio Profundo, from Peru in 2002, recognized as one of the world's greatest visionary artists. Pablo Amaringo was renowned for his intricate, colorful paintings inspired by his shamanic visions. Master communicator of the ayahuasca experience. Amaringo's art presents a doorway into the transcendental world of ayahuasca, intended for contemplation, meditation, and inspiration. So yeah, it is really intricate, beautiful. It reminds me a lot of, I believe his name was like Luis Fonsi, from Brazil. I've talked about him in previous episodes, it has that same kind of vibe, but you could tell that it's a little different. But regardless, super cool. I'll also post this one on Instagram. So the last artwork that I posted for this episode is also by Pablo Amaringo, and it is so trippy and so cool, so you're for sure going to want to go check that out on Instagram. That's at Grounded Spirits. No spaces, no dashes, nothing. It's just plain Grounded Spirits. So go check it out on there. DM me if you have any thoughts about this episode. If you learned something, please give this podcast a 5-star review. And yeah, come for the finale of this giant, massive, 500-page book. Next week, we're going to talk about how plants and culture go hand in hand, starting with art that is created under the influence, and talking about plants and literature, and then ending with plants with culture. So, see you next week, everybody. Bye.